Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko taniwha whakarangaroa, ko mau, ko hokianga te awa, ko mata houra te waka, ko nāpui toko iwi, ko Gemma toko wahine, ko Lola toko tamahine, and ko Ziggy toko tamahine pepe. Ko Amanda aho.
Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Amanda Lowry. I'm 50 years old. I'm a proud lefty of Ngāpuhi descent. I have a beautiful partner named Gemma of 20 years and two daughters, Lola aged 12 and Ziggy aged 9. For 20 years I was a chef. Food is my absolute love language. I've travelled the world. I've run my own business. I worked on super yachts. I walked 840 kilometres across Spain in the Camino de Santiago. I was a yogi, a motorbike rider, an academic and a kite surfer, until everything changed 9 years ago when I dived off my surfboard and I broke my neck. But not everything changed. I'm still a mama, and I'm still a partner, and I'm an academic and a chef and a sportswoman. I just do things in a different way. Now in this kōrero, I want you to think about your body and your life and the things that you value. I want you to think how you would react and respond to losing some of your physical function, or even all of your physical function. How would your family and friends react? I want you to think, whose body do you see when you open a textbook? It's a fit white male. And there's this widely held but kind of unspoken belief that anything different than that is lacking. It is other. So those assumptions underpinning everyday life, when they go without question, they go without probing, they normalize and privilege certain ways of being in the world. And that social division between normal and abnormal bodies define what it is to be human in society. So globally, disability is a social category. It's characterized by a lack of employment opportunities and education, resulting in discrimination, isolation, marginalisation, exclusion and poverty. And in New Zealand, even though 24% of our population identify as disabled, we are trying hard to address some of these inequalities. And to make New Zealand more inclusive, we've got the 2001 Disability Strategy. In 2006, we signed off on the International Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. But despite those big commitments, even here in New Zealand, disabled are the largest group of underemployed people. So elements of marginalisation, exclusion and poverty are still very much a part of many disabled people's lives. So to create some context here for you, I'm going to tell you my story. And because I realise that lived experience locates our understandings of the world. So this story is my creation story, and this is the place that I speak from. On the 7th of March 2013, I dived off my surfboard without my hands up above my head. I hit a sandbar and I broke my neck. It was only 6 days after the birth of our littlest daughter Ziggy, a sister for 3-year-old Lola. I heard the crunch. I tried to push myself up, but my arms and legs wouldn't work. I was calm for some strange reason, because I knew I was done. And I'd kind of decided that if worse came to worse, I would breathe in water, because I figured that was a better way to go. I'd been at the beach with a Spanish friend. We were going to go for a surf, and I'd promised Gemma that I'd just show him a good time and then I'd be back with her in our new bub. But now I was face down in the water, holding my breath, yelling out in my head, "Look up, Miguel, look up, Miguel." And for some funny reason, I knew that he'd be watching because I was a better surfer than him. And then he turned me over. I could see the sky, I could breathe, and I wasn't dead. Everything was so clear. Someone called an ambulance. I could hear Lola crying, and in the ambulance they were stabbing me with pins. I knew nothing would be the same. And yet in the emergency department, when they were cutting off my wetsuit and my bikini, I was trying to say, "Don't cut my bikini," because I really liked it. And for some reason I thought I would be wearing it the following week. A new life began the moment I broke my neck. I suffered 110% anterior dislocation, with C6 coming to rest in front of C7. My spinal cord, it didn't rip or tear, instead it stretched like a bungee. I'm pinned from C3 to T1 with C6 in a cage. The medical diagnosis is tetraplegia, with all 4 limbs affected. I'm paralyzed from my chest down, no bladder or bowel control, no core, so I can't cough or sneeze, no temperature regulation, so no sweat or no goosebumps. My legs don't work, but hardest of all, my hands don't work. When I hit the spinal unit 10 days after my accident, I hadn't managed to sit up. I had to work towards that in half an hour a day increments until I could manage 2 hours. It was so tiring. My new body left a whole lot to be desired. You know that feeling when you sit on a Swiss ball and you've got your feet on the ground and you're holding on with your hands? What I want you to imagine is, when you lift your feet off the ground and you've got, oh yeah, I've got this. And then I want you to take your hands away. And that feeling of instability is how it feels in this new body. You've kind of got the stability of a newborn. And so for me, I couldn't hold my hand up above my head without it wanting to fall, and I couldn't sit without wanting to pass out. I went from being someone who would ride down steps on my bike with my baby Lola between my arms. I would pull off backflips on my kite, and I would ride in 3-meter swell. There was a new experience of absolute fear when sitting on a bench, just with my feet on the ground, and then having to lean forward and look at my feet. There was something so simple. 2 weeks after injury, it made me want to vomit, and that drop looked as big as the Grand Canyon. But there's other stuff too, like how do you connect and care for what you can't feel when you are broken and nothing is the same? So I have impairments that disable, which means I'm unable to function in everyday life without support from others. I'm dependent on other people for almost every aspect of my physical life. It would be really easy to hand over that care, and lots of people do. It takes between 40 minutes and an hour and a half to get me up in the morning. I get help to wash, to shower, to toilet, and to dress. And managing that support and that care is not easy. There are physical, emotional, moral, and economic aspects of care that go unnoticed, and it is emotionally demanding to manage ourselves and the people who look after us. It is such a transition to go from that space of able-bodied privilege and freedom to the world of disability. So the moment I was baptized a C6, C7 tetraplegic, my story had already been written, and I felt that there wasn't much scope for deviation. And at times you feel less than human. And there was a real sense that my future is written on my body. With a new body, not only do you have to learn a new language, you have to learn a new culture. It's a whole new way of being. Like when you're able-bodied, independence is framed as being able to do things by oneself. But what you have to learn to accept when you're disabled is that our ability to control the care that we receive, that interdependence we have with support workers and with providers, that is what independence looks like. That is what freedom looks like in this body. We are bodies that need bodies to function in everyday life, and any element of control, however, whenever you can get it, that is what is so important. So disability itself doesn't necessarily create dependency and a lower quality of life. It's a lack of control over the help that is required that diminishes people's quality of life. So there's this funny idea which I really like. It's about crip time. And crip time challenges assumptions about pace and about scheduling, about what can and should happen in the world. And crip time, that word crip time, might make some of you cringe, but many of us use that language because it was used against us, and we use it in defiance and in humour. So my friend who's got cerebral palsy calls me a dumbass for diving off my surfboard and breaking my neck, and I call I call her a wobbly dribbly. It's her it's her self title. And we both call each other Crips. But you can't unless you know me really, really well. Anyway, Crip time is a really cool concept because it reflects experiences in bodies that are unpredictable, and at many times those bodies are defiant. And in a Crip world, the time that things take is dependent on many different factors that do not need consideration in an abled body. Crip bodies are impacted and mediated not only by our own body rhythms, but physical and social environments, people, and technologies. It is these factors that determine the pace and the quality of everyday life. You can feel the pressure change and the intensity shift when you come out of your home environment to the public sphere. When you look around you, you just see the curb cuts that will totally take you out if you get them wrong. The buildings and the doors and the furniture that are shaped for bodies that are meant to use them. And you're constantly reminded that you just don't fit. And for lots of people, being in the world, it's just too hard. I compare myself to my little girl Ziggy. Our journeys are completely aligned. When she was born and I got given a new body, and at 9 she's just mastered her body, her language and her understanding of the world. And 9 years on and I'm only just getting it too. I remember someone asking me to say, please tell me it gets better. And I said to them, I'm sorry, I can't. The only thing I can say is you just get better at it. The accident has created not just an internal change, but there's an external change too that impacts on how people perceive me and how they relate to me. And you know how when you're out and about, we kind of pay attention to the most salient features. You see nose rings and tats and dreads and beautiful bodies. And before I was 6 foot tall and athletic and sporty, and I was noticed for those reasons. And now it is this bloody thing. And I'd never spoken to anyone in a wheelchair in my old life, and it wasn't on purpose. It's just disability was not in my world. I just didn't see it, and now it is my world. But I don't back away. I try to still engage with the world. I look people in the eye and I smile and I don't back away from their stares. But that openness comes with a cost. And I know that people mean well, but I'm just trying to do some shopping with the kids and they'll put their hand on my shoulder and tell me well done and how inspirational I am. And I know they mean well, but it's bloody patronizing. And it just reinforces how few of us are out there living big lives. But I'm never rude, despite the fact I desperately want to be sometimes. But I have to see it. I see every opportunity like this as an opportunity to educate. I think that's why it's so exhausting being out in the world. And I can see why our world has got smaller. And we only go places where I can roll and where I can get out of the car independently with my kids without any support. Because I don't always want to be another job for my family to do. But the kids that I meet are awesome. They'll go, what happened to you? And I'll go, dived on my surfboard, broke my neck. And they'll go, was there blood? And then sometimes when I say no, I kind of lose half the audience. Or other times they'll go, what happened to you? And I'll go, nothing. What happened to you? And then they'll laugh. And I kind of think, we're the same, dudes. We're the same. And I think anything like this is a way to bring about greater inclusion. When I think about my old life and I look at this picture, I kind of think it's like the death of a friend. 8 years on and I still really miss her, but I can't wish her back. And I look at old pictures like that and I see someone else. But I'm really grateful to her for providing the strong foundations on which to build the new me. And as you would expect, there are still times of darkness and grief. Sometimes I think it would have been easier if I'd died, because everyone would have grieved, but they would have moved on. But actually, it only would have been easier for me. The girls need their mama, and Jem still loves me to bits. Crazy woman. So 9 years on, when you can say, so this is it. And I don't miss the big stuff, the adrenaline and the speed. But what does hurt my heart is when I think about how different my kids' lives would be with two able-bodied parents and how it would feel to pick them up and wrap my arms around them and hold them and feel them against me, or to lean over them at night and tuck them in. I think about how hard it is for my partner Gemma and how much I just want to hold her or let her sleep in or even just make her a cup of tea. When you are disabled, you have to make an effort to connect. And like, how do you do that when you're separated from the people that you love by machinery and like equipment, you know? And so for me, being in a power chair feels like I'm in a telephone box. Like, how do you hug someone when you're in a wheelchair? Like, you can't wrap your arms around your child or your partner and squeeze them. But in my family, the stand-up power chair is the one piece of equipment that bridges this gap. As soon as I stand up, both my kids come running and they stand on my foot plate and they put their arms around me and they hold me and I'm able to hold them body to body. And my partner too. It takes us back to what it used to feel like. There's always a moment of sadness and recognition about what's been lost, and I can't feel them squeeze against me, but that's not the point, because they can feel me holding them when I'm standing, and they know that I've got them. So in a funny kind of way, the kids actually get a better deal, because when they come home from school, like, I'm here, like, we talk and we play and I read to them, and if I were able-bodied, both Gemma and I would both be working and we would have way less time. And if I were honest, I would probably be looking out the window over their shoulder to see if the wind was blowing, to see if I could squeeze in a quick kite or a surf. So my kids' worldview is different than other kids. They know that some people are born different and that some have accidents or illness. And they ask, like, who takes care of them, Mum? And they want to make sure that those people are loved and that they're looked after. And they look at buildings and they look at footpaths and they talk about how hard it would be for people in wheelchairs, because they have lived experience of diversity and the difficulty that comes with it. They will be such competent and caring and capable young women, and I'm so proud. And because a Surf Lifesaver saved me, they both want to be surf lifesavers. So 4 years after my accident, I had tendon transfer to give me a bit of hand function. And like, before the surgery, I couldn't pull a grape off a stem or pull a tissue out of a box. My hands were kind of just flat and floppy. And now I can hold a knife and grab pots, and I'm cooking again. And that makes my heart happy. Like, we have 4 nights without carers where it's just me and the girls. And my partner Gemma says that when she comes home and sees me in the kitchen, that there's some kind of balance in the universe that's been restored. It's a little bit of a messy universe, but we are getting there. So by being present, I believe that I'm forging a new kind of life. I'm creating a new normal by engaging with all my heart and my soul, where I still play sport. So sport for me is transformational. I totally love wheelchair rugby. It is like violent chess. I didn't realise how important it would be to roll into a space where you buggers with legs are the odd ones out. There's this kind of unspoken camaraderie when you hang out with other wheelies. Like, I don't need to explain anything. No one asks any questions. Everyone's been there and they all just get it, you know? I feel whole in my rugby chair. I'm massively dumped. My feet are tucked under and I'm supported by a chest strap. And I don't know where I stop and the chair begins. And in it, I'm the most functional that I can be in this crazy new body. And I'm fast and I'm agile and I'm safe and I'm free. And I forget my limitations. And it was while playing wheelchair rugby that I forgot I was in a chair, because I was having so much fun. And it really helps my family, because the kids get to meet other families with mums and dads in chairs, and it's helped us make a new normal. I still love the ocean too, despite my rather tenuous relationship with her. I swim like a paddle steamer on my back in a very slow, rhythmic, kind of double arm backstroke. I swam the bridge to bridge swim. It's about 2 kilometers long for 7 times in the past 9 years. Last year I beat 10 able-bodied swimmers, and I thought to myself, poor bastards, when they watched me getting lifted, and I kind of yelled out to them that they had to better lift their game. It made me laugh. I'm not quite sure how they felt. So water is still my thing. And for the past couple of years, I've been in the Paralympic development squad. And luckily for me, it's all about classification and not age. And so they all got a little bit excited when they met me, like who wouldn't? But it turns out there's never been an athlete with my level of impairment ever swim for New Zealand. So as an S3, I am top 10 in the world. And kind of a big celebration in that is every time I swim, it's pretty much a New Zealand record. And I do like the odd win, you know. But the big picture is I'm trying to make pathways for other highly impaired athletes. Physically and metaphorically, I have a body that locates me in a different space than when I was able-bodied. Nothing is the same. My involvement in high-performance sport actually just magnifies my difference, and even more challenging, it classifies my difference from the norm. So this embodied experience, this is what situates my PhD research. And while local access to parasport has been transformational for my family and I, my transition to high-performance sport was problematic because it required shifts at the broader institutional and structural level, and they weren't ready for it. And so the fact that high-performance sport, and that's Paralympics, did not have the tools to include me, that provides the impetus for my PhD work. To participate in parasport, you need to be classified. So in the mid-1980s, there's a thing called an integrated functional classification system that got implemented, and it resulted in athletes being grouped on the basis of how their impairments impacted on their sports performance rather than their particular impairment. So historically it was cerebral palsy competing against cerebral palsy, spinal against spinal, but the aim of this new system was to ensure that winning or losing was based on your skill, talent, fitness and training rather than disability related variables. Like for example, I am an S3 swimmer, I have a spinal cord injury, I'm 75 kilos, I'm 6 foot tall, and I swim against other women with congenital impairments with really short torsos and small limbs. So what's really tricky when you think about being a classifier, and it's such a controversial process now, because the classifiers have to focus on sport-specific function across multiple forms of impairment. And as you can imagine, it kind of ends up being quite subjective because we all present so differently. But athletes understand that classification is a necessary component of participation in sport, but it's quite a confronting process to be in a space where classifiers are looking at your body from a purely medical perspective. You feel like you're not being seen as a person. They focus only on your impairment, and you're reduced in terms, you're biologically reduced and classified in terms of your difference from the norm. And those decisions that happen in those little rooms have massive implications for your future in sport. But despite the complexities, involvement in disability sport has some massively good outcomes. So opportunities for collective identity, belonging and change making, massive health and fitness benefits, which you can imagine, and then you've got more control over your life and more control over your body. In wheelchair sports, for example, the rules of the game are constructed in a way that allows athletes to celebrate rather than reject their impairments. And I've heard heaps of the crew, both basketball and wheelchair rugby, they celebrate their disabled identities and they refer to themselves as athletes rather than people who are disabled. And what I love is that disability sport is a transformative space, not only for the participants, but from the audience too, because it paves the way for alternative thinking and changing perception of difference. I've just seen people absolutely blown away watching wheelchair rugby, and they are addicted the minute they get in the chair themselves, and we can't even get them out. So it's this whole idea that high performance sporting spaces or sporting spaces, they allow people with impairments to resist. You can resist dominant ideology about disability being weak or passive or inactive or dependent, And then what you'll remember is even when the Paralympics were on and it's free for view, there's a massive celebration by the general public of high performance athletes in disability sport. We are so lucky that we get to do this stuff in this country. I feel very blessed. But there are still some issues. While sport is seen as a vehicle for enhancing the visibility of disability, by its very nature it excludes people with severe or degenerative impairments. So those values and norms that privilege the able body in high performance sport, they also are still apparent in parasport. So high performance athletes in this space, like I said, even though they're para, are expected to be functional, autonomous and motivated. And highly impaired athletes, while motivated, are not functional nor autonomous. Highly impaired athletes are not the Liam Malones or the Sophie Pascoes of the world. We do not run on blades or have beautifully developed torsos. We are bodies that need bodies. We have impairments that disable, and we are unable to function in everyday life without support from others. My research examines welfare and care for highly impaired high-performance athletes. It illustrates how care and interdependence is a vital part of our lives, and it's intensified with our participation in sport, and particularly in the high-performance environment. So the focus on highly impaired athletes, it's necessary and timely. And the case in point is the withdrawal of the woman featured in the photos there. She's a US Paralympian named Becca Myers. And what happened is the US had a decision where they wouldn't allow her to bring her personal care assistant. So the take on this is limiting access to essential support workers means that highly impaired athletes are unable to participate safely, physically and psychologically in disability sport. And so decision makers must understand that in the high performance sporting space, para-athletes' interdependence is magnified, and it is the lack of control over the physical help required that diminishes people's independence and totally undermines inclusion. This is a picture of me being lifted out of the pool when I was part of the high performance team in Cairns in 2020. In this day, for 2 races, I got lifted 18 times, which means I got handled. And that's the kind of stuff that has to happen when you're a highly impaired high performance athlete. And I don't think organizations even understand any of this. So that's why my work is so important. My aim is that scholars and practitioners in sporting bodies alike begin to examine their understandings and practices of care to support athlete welfare. I think if care were recognised as an integral part to our participation and welfare, then organisations all the way from grassroots right through to high performance could truly become inclusive. And there's several practical steps that could help to implement this goal. Like if there was extensive disability training in all sport and rec degrees, like at uni and techs, boom, massive win. Mandates by national sporting bodies that ensured that coaches and board members and officials and everyone who worked with and for disabled athletes actually understood the ideas behind impairment effects and the importance of care. Another big win. And also it's a massive win for all of those involved, because education not only benefits the organisations and the coaches, but highly impaired athletes kind of can learn to understand to manage their care to maximise their own performance. And the big picture is that whole idea of supporting and understanding that interdependence of disability living. It not only creates a more inclusive system, but it also raises the profile of support workers, and it helps to address the underrepresentation of highly impaired athletes in all sporting spaces. So that's it from me, whānau. So hei kōnei rā, I hope you enjoyed. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person sometime, and feel free to hit me up anytime you want to have a kōrero about fabulous, active, amazing disabled bodies.